Blacksmith of the Apocalypse. By Arcuser. Chapter 1041 On the Street Rooftop Conclusion. This guy is really tough, contrary to his looks, Marcel exclaimed, half joking and half annoyed through his gritted teeth. He and Elsa had started fighting together after her powerful entrance. His three original opponents had quickly fallen, but the man the Ice Queen had thrown over here was like a cockroach. Are you jealous? I'm used to jealousy. Not everyone can be strong and handsome. I don't hold it against someone who lacks both like you, the young man with the silver mask taunted. Despite looking like a potato after his fight with Elsa, he had only grown stronger and more handsome. Tisk, to think he held back against me, despite the beating I gave him, Elsa said, slight annoyance audible in her cold voice. Since the couple fought together, the young man had revealed that he was not only proficient in ice magic but also in fire magic. He spoke some mumbo-jumbo about yin and yang and how he had perfected controlling the properties of opposites. It sounded like a lot of bullshit and bragging to them, but his power was undeniable. What will you do now? You don't stand a chance, the young cultivator said with a smug face. He was right, they were in a stalemate and it was uncertain who would tire out first. Marcel and Urza shared a glance. In sync, they pulled out a potion bottle each, popping the cork, and chucked it. The young man could only stare in surprise. By the time he wanted to act, they had already thrown away the empty bottles. Time for round 3. They spoke and attacked together. Connecting the fire and ice, to create a storm to accompany their attacks, their powers had grown by several times. They doping. It was super effective. Facing their combined attacks, imbued with holy power, the cultivator had no more chance to catch a breath. They weaved their attacks together, quickly pushing into a corner, when suddenly, the constant banging in the city fell silent. The barrier above had vanished. In shock, the battle halted. That's my sign. Bye, the handsome man called out. Using the chance, he turned into a streak of rainbow light, fleeing from their fight. Dwarfs were well known for their willpower. They didn't just start off with a high score in the attribute, but also strong modifiers for stats like mental resistance. This was why Seth had no doubts when he gave Poulter not just the lunacy armor, but also the set of madness, 2 item sets that usually shouldn't be worn together. Poulter's willpower and resistance were off the charts compared to normal players. No matter what intrusive thoughts spoke to him, he would have the leeway to make his own decisions. He would not fall to lunacy or madness, unless he wanted it. Star-breaking shield bash, the dwarf clad in black flames cried out and charged at the giant like a madman. The shield didn't get much action in his previous frenzy, but now it was all he had left. He didn't use a skill but called out a phrase he had learned from Seth. Dumting's expression was visibly stumped. Although he had let himself be beaten to a sorry state to crush his opponent's mentality, the dwarf almost didn't react to the loss of his main weapon. Belatedly, the martial artist hurried to protect his especially vulnerable twin planets, when he realized what the dwarf was up to. Bruised arms blocked the smooth silver shield clad in shield aura and black flames. Because of the size difference, Dumting had to move into an awkward stance to defend against the attack from below. What kind of creature are you? To attack a man's star-breaking shield bash, the dwarf interrupted him, not stopping at all. He angled the shield and the smooth surface slid away from his forearms. Poulter ducked down, passing through his legs, and aimed straight up for the magic pouch. Like a dog hunted by a bee, the cultivator made a massive leap in the air, to evade the shattering of Bis dragon pearls. The edge of the silver shield barely missed the dangly bits. The aura of might surrounding Poulter visibly increased, when the dwarf made a 180 degrees turn to face his opponent who was now in mid-air. Star-breaking throw, he exclaimed, and threw the cutlass, his sidearm, after the opponent. Dumting grunted. He wasn't at the level where he could freely move in the air, but the midget was underestimating him. Kicking the air, he changed his position, but couldn't fully evade. The cutlass covered in dark flames deeply lodged into his thigh, instead of his whatchamacallit. You animal! Dumting cried out, when Poulter was already rushing to the place he was going to land. However, the martial artist was not disturbed enough to follow his pace. Dumting turned his leap into a jump attack. Gathering his spiritual energy, he was ready to crush the dwarf on the rooftop below. The offensive was always the best defense. Just before Dumting came down like an artillery shell, Poulter evaded, allowing the cultivator to drill through the roof into the floors below. The golems had long evacuated the building. It had only been Dumting and Poulter for a while. The moment the cultivator drilled into the rooftop, the sun finally vanished behind the mountains. The night began. When Dum Ting looked up to see his vertically challenged opponent, he saw his silhouette with the big waning moon as the background and slightly illuminated by the bright lights of the adjacent city. The hits on the barrier were now visible ripples of light across the dome that covered the city. The dwarf didn't follow him. Why had he suddenly become so calm, just glaring at him from above? Dum Ting used the moment of silence to circulate his qi and recover some of his wounds. He didn't know what had happened to the dwarf, but driving out the dark flames had become much harder than in their first fight. Overall, how had he become so much stronger? Are you hiding from me now? The dwarf's cackle came from above. Dum Ting took a deep breath and with one push of spiritual energy, he drove the dark flame from his wounds. He was ready to end the midget once and for all. Returning to the rooftop, he felt ready to face the dwarf until he met him in the moonlight. His senses tingled, signaling him extreme danger. Suddenly, Polter vanished from his view. Shield Saint's charge! Shield bash! The words reached his ears when the shield already towered over him. He crossed his arms but couldn't mitigate the force. The martial artist was catapulted across the rooftop. With the terrifying acceleration, the dwarf followed the cultivator. Lunacy unleashed. Shield bash! Dum Ting had just come to a halt after rolling across the rooftop when the dwarf was already on him. He wasn't wearing the shield anymore. What bash was he talking about? He was holding the shield with both hands on the rim and hit his upper arm with the edge. An audible crack betrayed the fact that his arm actually broke from that strike. He kept repeating the word shield bash as he hammered him with the shield. The normal hits had him winding in pain, empowering his broken bones with energy. Dum Ting could only cower on the ground and protect his vitals. Star-breaking shield bash! Instinctively, the martial artist moved to protect his stars, however, no attack below the belt came. Instead, he got a massive hit to his now exposed head. Was this how it ended? Suddenly, things went dark. But it wasn't that he was gone, but the barrier in the sky had vanished. The elder did it. Ha! As long as he got out of this he heard a crack and things went dark. This time for good. Only Polter was left on the roof, looking at the sky, breathing heavily. He had gotten his revenge, but had they lost the war? Chapter 1142 Eclipse of Mercy. Mina had separated from the others, earlier and headed west. As the night fully descended, she abandoned the alpaca and prowled the city on her own, traveling through the all-encompassing shadow of the night. The main battle happened in the distance, with the explosions and noise of battle only serving as a dampened background noise. Love had told her that the Saintess of Gatries was creating trouble in the northwestern outskirts of the Pythian village. The city in this place was eerily quiet. Seeing the usually busy street absolutely quiet was the best sign that something was not right. Other places were still brimming with combat on the streets, but the northwest had turned into a ghost town, devoid of people. All the people staying in the Pythian village are either adventurers or cultivators who came to make a living by running inns and restaurants. Although players could use Heim Call to flee, the average level of these people was quite high, and she doubted they would have just evacuated because they faced some attacks. This situation was a little different from what she heard from Love. At least she couldn't remember her mentioning any mass disappearances. Could this really be the work of the Saintess? She was pondering about it when the sky suddenly turned darker. Surprised, she realized that the barrier had vanished. She was about to call Love when her ears twitched. For the first time, she heard a foreign sound since she entered the silent city. It was a suppressed curse followed by a small repeating sound. She came to the conclusion that it had to be steps. Following the soft sounds of steps, the beastman found a lone adventurer sneaking through the back alley behind a restaurant. She couldn't see his face, but he was clearly trembling. Despite being in a state of fear or panic, he was moving slowly with measured steps. He was probably a thief or assassin class, to sneak like that despite the situation and his mental state. Passing him, swimming through the shadows, she slowly emerged right in front of him. The adventurer froze in fear, but he didn't scream, or make any sounds. Suspecting there was a reason for his silence, she spoke as softly as possible. "I'm Mina, a lord of Mina's March. What happened here?" She spoke barely any louder than the man breathed, but her words were clearly audible in the quiet night air. The man swallowed hard, hesitating whether he should believe her and talk, or whether this was just another nightmare, and it was finally time for him to die. "I want to help, but I have to know what happened," the cat girl insisted. I don't know. I was still fighting those crazies not too long ago, but when the night fell, more and more people vanished? No, that's not the right word, or maybe it is. They were simply gone from one moment to the other. He breathed the words more than he spoke them. His ragged breath made it hard to follow. I think it has something to do with noise. At first, there was too much going on, but later I realized. Whenever there was a scream or a loud shout, it suddenly cut off. How long has it been since it started? Mina asked concerned. It had barely been 20 minutes since Love told her to come here. Had the situation changed this rapidly? It was hard to believe that this many people vanished this such a short amount of time. The same test she had seen in the tournament didn't seem to be capable of that. I don't know when it started, but it's been 5 minutes since I heard another person for the last time, he answered, shaking his head. The lady from Myanmar realized that he didn't have any more answers than this. At least he was able to provide her with some clues. Why didn't you use home call? Mina finally asked. Home call was the ultimate skill for players to save their lives. Even if he registered the Pythian village as a return spot, that would have probably been better than sneaking around here. Things were dire if the perpetrator actually managed to block the skill. The formation needed to block teleportation needed a lot of time and preparation. Pulling that off right under their noses was concerning and slightly embarrassing. To the point that she would even suspect that the perpetrator hand inside help. Ugh, I would have if I could. My home call is on cooldown. I used it to get back here to see the final. I bet a lot of the guys that vanished just dipped out, he pressed out, frustrated. Mina nodded, glad that her original conjecture was true, and it wasn't the worst case scenario. This would lower the estimated number of victims. Unless the system skill was on cooldown, nobody unwilling to fight had to stay. Of course, people from the voracious cloud continent didn't have that option. That begged the question of what happened to those guys. You can get out of this place alone. Aim for the stadium at the center, she told him after a moment of thought. The stadium? Are you crazy? Fights there are the worst, he hissed agitated. Yeah, and the stadium is the safest and most chaotic place in the village. Nobody will notice some guy sneaking by toward it. Here, they will at least let you stay within the barrier bound with this, she said and handed him a card made of bones of Seth. He hesitated but finally took it with a look of surprise. Thank you, he whispered. Now go, she said, sending the man on his way, while she turned back to her original direction. With some clues now, she knew what she was looking for. She had the hunch that those people were still alive. A noise-triggered method to have people vanish without a trace seemed to elaborate if the goal was simply to collect corpses. It made no sense to her. If they were this powerful, they could have just killed everyone present directly and collected the bodies. That would have eliminated the chance for people to use home call, too. Love, what is going on with the barrier? She quietly contacted the command center before she continued. Don't worry, things are back on track now, was the only answer she got. Weirdly enough, it was enough for her to stop worrying. She gave a quick update on what she found out before she continued on the journey. Following her hunch, she knew what she was looking for. Thanks to Master Mountain she knew, whether it was a cultivator or a player, there was next to no way to just let a crowd of living people vanish. This meant she had to look out for a place full of people. That shouldn't be that hard, with how empty the rest of the city was. Ultimately, this still meant that she was simply prowling around the city, just with little more direction, paying attention to places where they could collect bodies or hold people captive. She felt really stupid for this when she finally came across what she was looking for. At the northwestern edge of the Pythian village, someone created a field of ruins. Magical symbols covered the cleared arena, glowing an ominous dark orange color in the night. The people she had been looking for were limply levitating in the air above this area. They didn't even try to hide this shit. It was even lit up. Swallowing her indignation and frustration about the time she had spent searching, she focused on the situation at hand. The people seemed unconscious. Except for the rings of energy that looked like black crowns of thorns surrounding their heads and the thorns piercing into their skulls, they seemed fine. At least her hunch was right and they were still alive. Contrary to her doubts, she actually saw the saintess of Gatries standing in the center of this place, which looked unlike any magic formation she knew. Kneeling in front of the 3-meter-tall statue of a blindfolded demon witch, she seemed immersed in prayer. A ritual. This was the only explanation Mina was able to come up with. Then, was the kidnapping of these people also part of her power she didn't show the tournament, or was it maybe the effect of an item? The statue, for example, seemed quite peculiar. Was this the true face of Gatries? When are you finally done, woman? A scruff, dissonant voice suddenly broke the silence of the night, making Mina jolt in surprise. Appearing from the darkness, as if stepping through the thick, black smoke, was a demon. Surprised, she realized that he was also among the tournament participants. Stepping out of the shadow, Mina released a few golem eyes from her inventory. Since they had lost contact with the ones originally in this area, she had to bring new ones herself. The fight wouldn't be broadcast live, but an edited version was planned to be released later. She threw her hair around and smiled at the camera. Showtime. Chapter 1143 in the Skies, 3. The battle in the sky was now in full swing. On one hand, the two fleets had finally engaged in combat. The cultivator ship were firing formation cannons and energy weapon of their own, facing the beam of Epsilon. While the ships were locked in aerial battle, they were surrounded by a cloud of individual combats. Many of the weaker cultivators had descended to the city, either felled by the attacks from the ground or to evade the offense of Mina's march. They rather faced the golems, than the people on aerial strikers. Those left battling in the sky were the various elders and people from Mina's march. These opponents were not to be underestimated, although the rank of elder seemed to lose some of its meaning when facing a sect alliance with hundreds of them. Each of them ranged between level 85 to level 120 when observed with an appraisal skill, and they all possessed weird and ultimate skills and techniques that could raise their level in a desperate moment. It became even more chaotic when either side brought their pets and mounts on top of their own power. Aerial strikers and exotic beasts rained from the sky, in addition to cultivators and players. Despite each member of the Oath Guard having breached level 90 and being clad in relic-rated items, there was no easy victory. Caleb's lance was evaded by a hair's breadth when he charged at the figure in black and red robes. The man in question used no weapons, but his hands were like claws. He had already punched a hole through the stomach of an Oath Guard and was about to finish the man when the Dragon Knight interrupted. Dark Sovereign, Sodali Mo leave 118. These were the most dangerous ones among the cultivators left in the sky. Some of these alliance members were leaders of their sects or had the standing of Grand Elders. They possessed power a normal Oath Guard couldn't compare to. It couldn't be helped. Oath Guards were chosen by character, not by skill. They usually had common or uncommon classes that lacked the skills to cross this difference in power. They mostly relied on their equipment to kill stronger opponents, but that approach had its limits. Although the lance was avoided, Wyvern managed to snatch the man from the opponent's hand. There was no time to get him to safety, so the Wyvern threw the body to a passing firefly, while Caleb had a short back and forth with the cultivator. I don't know if I should call you brave or stupid to face this paragon, the Dark Sovereign spoke boastfully. I know you aren't part of Mina's march. I will give you a chance to live. All I wish is to take revenge on Mina's Mar for the damage and loss we suffered because of them, he offered graciously. Caleb squinted. He had gotten a very short briefing about Mina's Mar's history with cultivators, but this guy didn't seem like a member of the Silk River sect, who should have suffered the most. He looked dark and evil, the aura he gave off was cruel and brutal. I see. What did they do to you? The knight played along, lowering his lance. Of course, he had no intention to agree with the other, but it was a good method to buy some time. This man seemed strong, engaging with him would either be a hard or an expensive fight. The more time he bought, the better the chances became. Although the initial situation in this battle seemed dire, as both sides seemed to suffer tremendous damage. However, there was a great difference between the cultivators and the players. In general, cultivators were strong warriors or magicians with strong individual battle prowess. Even when working together in so-called formations, these had either offensive or defensive purposes. Players on the other hand existed in a party system for the most part. They had various roles and specializations to work together and survive in a dungeon. What they had that cultivators didn't have were healers. Unlike the players, cultivators had no way to quickly recover in the middle of combat. Some may have had strong regeneration or consumables, but nothing could compare to the convenience and speed of healers and health potions. Although it seemed like an even fight in the beginning with many Oath Guards and aerial strikers leaving the battlefield in the same numbers as cultivators and beasts, most of the players returned to get healed by their party members and the aerial strikers repaired themselves on the ground. As time went on, their side grew stronger, whittling away at the cultivator army. So, the more time Caleb bought, the higher the chance that he didn't have to face this guy alone. Ha, I know you are buying time, but I don't mind. I will satiate your curiosity. My elders went to the length of gifting these savages with the grace of the blood berserk pill, and as thanks they colluded with the despicable Mount Crane sect to strike us. Caleb cocked his head. That called up a memory. Wait, wasn't that this weird super addictive drug that turned people into mindless beasts? He asked disgustedly. They were blessed with the power of the berserk demon. It is their fault if their mind is too weak to handle this blessing, the Dark Sovereign said leisurely. And then those guys that got the blessing, got into the next batch of pills, wasn't that it? Caleb wanted to throw up at the thought that people ate medicine made by other people. To serve their essence to a greater goal, is the final price to pay for blessing received. Do not besmirch their sacrifice as something unclean, the cultivator warned him. Don't try to make it sound nice. I heard you people poisoned refugees with the stuff. You fed it to unsuspecting people. That's what Caleb gagged at the thought. The disgust it brought him, had seared that story into the back of his mind. Knowing that this was the guy responsible for these acts gave Caleb the shove he needed to drop his original plan. Rib. The sound of a scroll being used. Ding. You have been affected by the scroll of indiscernible speed. Your movement speed has increased by 200%. Your attack speed increased by 50%. Ding. Your pet has been affected by the scroll of indiscernible speed. Your movement speed has increased by 200%. Its attack speed increased by 50%. There was nothing left to say, no more time to buy. Caleb decided that this was worth the price. He had already buffed himself with potions earlier. After ripping a scroll, he charged at the Dark Sovereign on Wyvern's back. Now this fight was more even. The flying lizard swiped its claws at the fiendish cultivator. Barely evading, his robes ripped, exposing a pale, perfectly trained chest. His hand shot up, but not to protect his chastity, but to defend against the lance that weaved in between the claw attack. The tip of the relic-rated lance tore the skin of his palms, but Caleb could tell that he jumped backward to mitigate the damage, otherwise he would have at least pierced the man's hands. Coming to a halt after tumbling back through the air for a few steps, his opponent grumbled. You have thrown my mercy to the wind. I will make you regret choosing to fight me, the man barked, pulling an ominous black whip from his sleeves. The black, shiny surface resembled the carapace of a bug, oozing with a dark aura, like a curse. As if you weren't fast enough, now you even pulled out a whip? Didn't your partner tell you that's not manly to be too quick? Caleb's taunted, moments before Wyvern let loose a massive breath attack that covered the man and the surface of half a football field. It is not the duration, but the endurance that counts, the Dark Sovereign exclaimed, swinging his arm over and over. By quickly lashing out, he created a barrier around himself to block the flames. That's what they all say, but we know it's not true. Caleb laughed, stabbing forward, using Dragon Lance. The energy attack released from his mighty lance passed through the remnants of the breath, absorbing the Elder Wyvern's fire to further strengthen the speed and attack power. The brightly shining lance exploded on the dark ball the cultivator had created around himself, bursting it. With a cry, the Dark Sovereign was thrown away, tumbling through the air. The cultivator was able to catch himself, a moment before crashing into a rooftop. Yet, he got close enough for one of the golems to take a swipe at him. He evaded the surprise attack in a hurry, shooting a glare at the golem, before turning to Caleb again. Where are you going, quick shot? Are you running away from facing a real man? The Dark Sovereign suddenly suffered a taunt from behind. It's not like I don't understand you. How could a coward like you dare to face a real male like this? General Orc, the ugly beast on the rooftop, laughed heartily. You little, pulling the slightly damaged whip taut, he was ready to attack the Orc golem. It was the perfect chance for Caleb. With an overwhelming mounted knight's charge, he rammed his lance into the Dark Sovereign's back. With the center of his upper body missing, he tumbled to the ground. Chapter 1144 On the Streets. Frozen decay. Eastern part of the Pythian village. Dust crunched under his heavy boots as he reached the place Love told him about. Looking around, he frowned grimly and slightly disgusted. The whole street was filled with withered bodies. Seeing the scene and connecting it with the crunch, made a shiver run down his spine. Maybe all the dust here was the bodies of victims. He had a hard time thinking of many things worse than this. Maybe it was comparable to the memories of the war with the Maritime Empire in Y City, but those times were still worse in his opinion, as it was his comrades that littered the streets, ripped into pieces, not a bunch of strangers turned to husks. Judging by their attire and weaponry who seemed mostly untouched, it wasn't hard to guess that they were cultivators. Whether they were part of the alliance or not, he couldn't tell at this point. Still, he doubted all of them were hostiles. Whoever did this just didn't care about friend or foe. Nervously, his right gripped the handle of the pipe harder, while the left did the same with the adamantium bulwark, the upgraded version of his original shield. It shared all the original functions, except that it was made of adamantium, had higher base stats, and added 120 to strength and endurance. When he turned around the corner, he found the probably weirdest situation yet. He found two confirmed hostiles fighting each other. Even weirder was that one of them was actually supposed to have died a little earlier. On one side was a criminally handsome cultivator. His pale skin like jade stood in stark contrast to his fingers covered in crimson blood. The other was a lanky man hiding his face, swinging a rusty saber around. How did the priest of corruption, who fled from Cade, get involved in a fight with the Dark Sovereign Caleb had supposedly killed? The thing was that he originally wasn't here for either of the two. According to Love, Alf Alpha Bignoggin the Sword Summoner was supposed to go on a killing spree here. He was one of the participants of the tournament's first round and was a mix of swordsman and summoner. During the current chaos, his actions outed him as an agent of Spacia. However, there were no traces of anybody, but those two duking it out. The fearsome corrosive saber the priest wielded clashed with the blood claws of the Dark Sovereign over and over. Although his hands sizzled, there were few signs of the Dark Sovereign suffering any damage from the holy weapon that had wrecked quite a number of people during the tournament. Tekker was still deliberating who to take out first when the fight finally took a decisive turn, as the cultivator managed to grasp the priest's neck and wrist. Holding the saber at a distance, the claw choked the priest, who started withering at a visible speed. Jump am. Sock am. Within the blink of an eye, Tekker appeared behind the Dark Sovereign, and the curved end of the pipe struck the man's skull. With Jump M he had charged behind the cultivator, and with Sock M he dealt 3 times the physical damage because it was an underhanded attack to a vital area. The cultivator fell to the floor from the surprise attack and let go of the priest, who fell to his knees, coughing and gasping for air. His desiccated appearance quickly healed and would be gone in a matter of moments. Ugh! How the cultivator on the ground started struggling again. Despite the tremendous boost of the legendary weapon, Tekker's active lack of physical damage despite his stats shone again. Despite suffering the strike to the head with perfect execution, the cultivator was not even knocked out, rubbing the back of his head. How dare you ambush me, the Dark Sovereign Sode! A second strike with the pipe shut him up and stopped him from trying to stand up. It triggered several effects of sleep paralysis, like blindness and paralysis, but most importantly silence. Pressed down by the curse of burden and paralyzed, the cultivator was forced to shut up. I don't care what soda you are, I prefer my beverages still. Tekker frowned, wondering how often he would have to strike the man in the head to end him once and for all when the priest suddenly spoke up. You are Tekker, right? Thanks for the clang. He had been amicably speaking to the walking fortress when he suddenly tried to attack him and the floored sovereign, only for the attack to be easily deflected by Tekker's shield. While the priest was still recovering his weapon, the pipe struck forward, quick as a snake, biting the priest's new. In addition to the satisfying crunch of the joint, Tekker hooked it with the bent end of the pipe and pulled the priest off his feet. In a fluid motion, he brought the pipe back around and struck the sovereign's ribs, to add another layer of status effects and the curse of burden. After all, he didn't want the guy to run away while he dealt with the priest. Enduring the curse himself, he made only 2 steps forward. The moment the priest of corruption looked up, the pipe broke his shoulder. Now this was how it was supposed to be. Although the priest had fought on almost equal terms with the cultivators, his body was much weaker, despite recovering at an incredible rate. Flung to the side again, the priest groaned under the pain and the curse of burden. Originally, I didn't come for either of you, but since I found you, I will have to take care of you, Tekker spoke with his calm, deep voice as he towered over the priest of corruption. Take care of me? Ha! He laughed out as intricate tattoos started glowing across his body. The saber jumped up and slashed across Tekker's chest, but it didn't cut anything. In the tournament, flesh and armor were decomposed by this weapon, but facing the master of defense, it could only slide off his personal shield. Although corrosion is a higher concept compared to basic effects, I have 75% resistance against it. The damage of your weapon can't even get past my defense to touch my equipment, Tekker explained, almost feeling sorry for the man. Haha, that means I can't damage you, but you can't kill me either. Just let me go, I will leave Earth quietly, the priest offered a compromise. You are right, I can't kill you. As a matter of fact, I can't even deal enough damage to kill the other one. However, I can keep you here until I called someone that can take care of you, he added with an amused smile, as he proceeded to call Love for backup. I will send Cade your way. Cinema Dimension. For the first time in a long while, the whole hall was absolutely silent. All gods present were watching various perspectives of the war with rapt attention. Even Seth decided not to complain that Minasmar wasn't going all out, it made for a more exciting battle. However, a sudden clapping broke the silence. Happily slapping her hands together was a new figure sitting in the front row, right beside Hades and Persephone. She was a mountain of a woman, giving off a motherly aura. Hades looked over at his grandmother clapping excitedly. Yeah, what happened? He asked, leaning over to the personification of Earth. She gifted him a bright smile, a witty glint in her eyes. Cuckoo, you will see soon, she said mysteriously, not intending to spoil her grandchild's fun. For Gaia to be this happy, he had some ideas about what he was supposed to look forward to. Amused, the god of the underworld leaned back in his seat, waiting for the show to start. Chapter 1145 Super Ebola. Mina knew what she had to do. She had seen the power of the Saintess in the arena. The extreme adaptability of Gatrice that was supposed to drive the opponent into despair, to crush their spirit until they accepted her mercy. What was needed in this case was not overwhelming power, but a single quick and powerful attack that could end everything in one go. Mina had just the perfect weapons for that. The cat girl appeared from the shadows behind the praying Saintess and struck down with Asclepius Needle, using the assassin skills Backstab and Lethal Strike, in addition to Shadow Blade from her Shadow Assassin class. Her strike was accompanied by the shattering of a barrier. Of course, the Saintess of Gatrice was not chanting on her knees, without any defense at all. However, the bubble of divine power shattered under the power of the attack. The saint's defense was broken, but Mina's attack had also lost a lot of its force. Half expecting it, Mina only used the dagger's plague strike and down with the sickness after the shield was broken. The first casting a deadly disease on the Saintess, the second casting a normal disease onto her. Ding! Target has been inflicted with dead disease equals Super Ebola Earth Strain. Ding! Target has been inflicted with random disease equals Galloping Leprosy. Ding! Ilufsif the Asuriant is feasting. Target can't use magic or active skills for 10 seconds. Doha! What have you done? My innards, the Saintess turned to her, tears of blood flowing from her eyes. The stabbing wound in her back seemed like the smallest problem when her lower robes became tainted with blood and worse. Disgusted and fascinated, Mina took several quick steps back. Goddess! Help! She thrashed around on the ground, tortured by whatever Super Ebola to her. Galloping Leprosy only just started to appear, as her skin dissolved at a visible speed. She was covered in growing lesions, turning her whole body into a big, infected wound. Yeah, no. We can't have that, Mina shook her head. She couldn't allow her to somehow plea for divine help, so she swung the shard of biting ice, casting Cursed Frost on the Saintess. Before she could speak any further, she was encased in a shell of cursed ice, that slowly absorbed her life force, in addition to the damage the diseases dealt. She probably wouldn't last the full 5 minutes of the Cursed Frost. Although this was why she was sent here, Mina was surprised about how easy it went. Well, she was also quite lucky with the RNG on the disease. Super Ebola? What even was that? It totally destroyed the Saintess in moments. With the Saintess of Gatrice stuck in the coffin of ice, slowly nearing her demise, the beastman had time to pay attention to the statue she was praying to. The weird, demonic effigy, which was probably the true face of Gatrice, only shown to her dearest followers, was slowly losing its glow after the prayers stopped. The runic formation in the area did the same. Despite that, the people floating in the air wearing the crowns of thorns were not released from their curse. Despite the ritual being interrupted, they kept floating around with their mindless expressions. She stopped her ears from twitching when she heard an almost unperceivable sound from behind her. It was followed by the sound of a blade cutting the air. A crude rapier passed through her shoulder but didn't cause any damage or pain. Having used the power of the Ring of Gyges to face the surprise attack, she used this chance to counterattack, slashing the demon across his chest, leaving a cut and a deep gash in his flesh. The pig-faced creature grunted deeply in surprise and pain. Ding! Ilufsif the Asuriant is feasting. Target can't use magic or active skills for 10 seconds. Intangibility? Interesting, the attacker commented as he dashed away to gain distance from the cat girl. Mina pursued him, both daggers drawn, ready for a melee fight, while his skills were sealed. However, he managed to stay alive for the duration of 10 seconds, after which he turned into smoke. The cloud of demon smoke then charged back to the encased priestess. You are Mina, right? I didn't think I would be lucky enough to actually meet the Tower Master's woman alone out here, the demon said with a crooked smile. Just anyone from Mina's AMR would have done the trick, but to lure out someone of special interest, what a great day. You will be the perfect hostage. Porcobello, Elite, leave 99. Hearing the demon's talk, Mina inadvertently used target gauge, the assassin version of observe, to check his level. It had not changed from the time of the tournament, but she decided to stay vigilant. There were enough cases of people exceeding the level limit using various techniques. Don't you think you overestimate yourself, if you think you can capture me? Mina asked honestly, with a slight intention to taunt him. Maybe he would blurt something out when he was agitated. Oh, right, I forgot, he said and pulled a ring from his finger. It was a crude black iron ring and it turned to dust, the moment it was unequipped. The moment it was gone, his aura exploded. Porcobello, Elite, leave 100. Porcobello, Elite, leave 103. Porcobello, Elite, leave 108. Mina didn't need a skill to tell her that he was rapidly growing stronger, but it helped her quantify the difference in power. His level kept jumping higher and higher with bigger and bigger steps, and despite looking incremental, the power he exuded rose exponentially. By the time the power stopped rising, Mina's couldn't even see the level anymore. He had managed to reach leave 118 herself. For her skill to stop working, the beast had to be at least 50 levels above her, so probably in the 170s. The visual change was tremendous, too, as the demon had grown more and more bestial with every jump in power, turning him into a 4-meter-tall hairy hog, walking on its hind legs and a snake tail. When Porcobello was finished with his transformation, he kicked the ice sarcophagus, breaking the curse and sending the saintess flying across the ground. Get up, you stupid wench! I don't care if you are on your dying breaths, finish the ritual, he barked at the sainted, who was crawling on the ground, puking and sweating blood. She looked like a decomposing corpse, but only 2/3 of her HP were depleted so far. She whined and cried. Unable to speak, she only nodded at the demon's words and scurried over to the effigy, to continue her prayer. Then the beast turned to her, cracking his neck and knuckles. Still doubting my power, he asked brashly. Mina couldn't say that she wasn't intimidated. Her instinct told her to run away. Even with her legendary equipment, she was not confident about defeating this kind of monster. In the moment of silence that ensued as Porcobello waited for her answer, his expression suddenly changed. His smug smile vanished as his eyes turned big. Ding! Ally of target has been inflicted with deadly disease equals Super Ebola Earth strain. Ding! Ally of target has been inflicted with random disease equals galloping leprosy. Ugh! What is? He suddenly choked, holding his stomach. Bitch! What is this? There is no way I would contract a mortal disease, he mumbled. Mina was just as shocked as the demon. She never heard that demons could get sick, but she had also never heard of Super Ebola. There were things on Earth that couldn't be explained by system standards, like a zombie virus able to infect even the undead. She was reminded of the experimentation in Beta and the immortal serum of the scene. Was this another danger still asleep somewhere on Earth? Duh! The giant pig shouted as a fountain of brown sludge erupted from its rear. As the stream of waste flowed, it shot Mina a hateful glance that made her heart shiver. Even Super Ebola couldn't do much more than give this transcendent the shits. Enraged by the rapid evacuation of his bowels, the beast charged at the cat girl. Mina wasn't a masochist, and she had no wish to fight a beast spraying liquid manure everywhere. She knew what to do in the face of overwhelming power. Chapter 1146 Cut Strings. Covered in emerald aura, the glaive bit into the torrential wind blade. For a moment both powers wrestled to gain the upper hand, but ultimately it was a simple attack struggling against an intelligent opponent. Before the glaive could sustain any lasting damage, the Emerald Mountain Emperor angled the blade and deflected the mighty attack straight up in the air. The maneuver seemed effortless from an observer's standpoint, but Longjian knew it better. Through his connection with the puppet, he was able to monitor its status perfectly. In life, the Emerald Mountain Emperor was a mighty cultivator who had stepped into the peak of the Dao-seeking stage, just shy of becoming an immortal. Although his spiritual power slightly diminished after his death and being turned into a puppet, his body had been improved using various highest earth-grade materials. Despite almost being a heaven-grade puppet, his joints and bones had creaked and cried, facing the attack head-on. He had no time to rest. Before long Jian knew what was going on, the Emerald Emperor had moved again, the wide blade of the Jian Dao blocking a tiny fist that had aimed for his heart with the speed of an arrow. The fist hitting the metal sounded like a bell being rung. The tiny concubine of the Tower Master left her seat on the windowsill to attack him. The puppet master finally realized that he was in danger. The hidden mage and the visible fairy, he couldn't just rely on the Emerald Emperor to face both enemies. Go look for the mage, he commanded the Bright Moon Wolf to search for the hidden enemy, as two more puppets appeared beside him. He doubted the puppets spread throughout the region would be of much help to face the concubine, this was why he brought out two more cultivator puppets. The Swift Breeze duo was a pair of brother and sister that made a name for themselves 500 years ago. They were assassins who even killed people in the early stages of the Dao-severing realm in their height. The skeletal remains he pilfered from their grave lacked much of their former strength, but they still possessed their incredible movement techniques. With overwhelming speed, that managed to drive the tiny foe back. Their fists were unable to penetrate the shield she used in defense and offense, but that wasn't their job anyway. It was the Guandao appearing whenever there was a gap, to break the bug's shell. This is starting to get fun, the concubine commented, and her tiny armor started glowing. The next moment she matched the speed of the assassin duo. On the other hand, they couldn't match her strength. With fists covered in golden spheres, she started punching the puppets, breaking them apart. You got any more? She asked with an excited smile. She was about to attack the Emerald Emperor when the ruins were crushed again. The skull and parts of a massive wood, thrown around in a tornado, suddenly came crashing down when the storm disintegrated. Long Jian recognized them at first glance. They were parts of his Bright Moon Wolf. Disgracefully disassembled, the puppet returned, together with the perpetrators of its destruction. A bulky-looking man in armor and a petite-looking fairy, carrying a staff. It was the kind of magic staff with a big orb at the top, that the people of Earth used for their sorcery, not as a weapon. I knew it was him. I told you it was him, the female told the buff guy beside her. I never said you are wrong. I just noted that there could be someone else using puppets here. It's not a discipline exclusive to him, the bulky fellow argued. Bickering like that, they appeared on top of the hill of debris. This wasn't good. He recognized them as Lords of Mina's March. The woman was an elemental sorceress. The wind attack earlier had to be her doing. The physician was not much of a concern, but the other two. The spread puppets needed time to assemble. He had to act quickly even if he had to take a loss here. Sentinel Centipede, Granite Toad, Steel Ox. Work with the Emerald Mountain Emperor to buy time, he called forth the three puppets with the best defense and instructed them using the soundless communication technique. Surrounding Long Jian appeared three more beasts. The first was a massive, ugly centipede with a dark black carapace shining as if it was lacquered. It looked especially mortifying with the irregular shiny spikes on its back, glinting in the twilight of the night. It was the size of a bus and appeared to his right. The second was a grey toad with a coarse skin appearing to his left. It had barely any color at all and seemed to fuse with the background. For normal eyes, the toad was hard to make out in the darkness, despite being the size of a cow. The third was a steel blue water ox the size of a small apartment building. Towering over Long Jian from behind him, it overshadowed the whole area. Together with the Emperor, they protected the puppeteer from four directions. Wow, just how many more do you have? You are almost like Seth, the tiny foe whistled at the sight of three new puppets. Of course, your toys can't compare to his, she added offhandedly, dismissing his work as second-rate. Oh, please. You don't even know what you are talking about. The golems you people make are crude compared to the intricate art of our puppet craft, the young cultivator argued. But not because of pride, but because he saw a chance to buy time and preserve his four defenders. Ha! Wanna bet? The brute took the bait. He saw the other two shake their heads, unable to say anything. Maybe the winged girl was belligerent in general? If he could get her to argue with him using words, then... Here, let's have a duel, just puppets. How about that? She suddenly said and brought out a golem from her spatial equipment. Wearing full plate armor it looked like a shining silver knight. It had similar proportions to his Emerald Mountain Emperor, only that the weapon it used was a diabolical-looking mace. This wasn't what he wanted at all. However, maybe that was even better. Who knew how long he could lock the dimwit in a discussion before she would snap and come swinging at him? Is that your only contestant? Then is it my 4 against your individual 1? And those 2 won't interfere, he asked to make sure. If she was really stupid enough to give him such an advantage. In that case, he would have been able to draw out this duel until his army assembled. Sure, it's not like I need more than her. Right, Esperanza, the fairy said confidently. In turn, the golem slammed its fist against its chest. It was a mighty clank, showing how much force was in that movement. Exactly, no need to bother anyone else, the golem said in a dull, but slightly high voice. Then shall we begin? Long Jian asked, confident that he would be able to get out of there alive. Maybe he would even be able to come out on top today? He would slowly whittle down this golem, and by the time he ended the match, these 3 would be encircled by his army. The night golem stepped forward, the bright silver armor, reflecting the moonlight and the stars. Weighing the brutal mace in its hand, it leaned back. He couldn't make out any eyes, but its posture made it seem like it was looking down on him. Before we start, let me pose a question, as you seem quite happy about this situation. Did you know that giving someone hope is one of the cruelest things one can do? Esperanza asked in wicked glee. Southwestern outskirts. A rainbow streak of light was shooting towards the edge of the Pythian village. Since the barrier was gone, the handsome man with the silver half-mask saw no reason to stay any longer and risk his life. Since Yuma Ma broke the barrier, he would simply rejoin once the immortal brought everything under control. Once he was outside the Pythian village, he would simply hide close by, and his thoughts came to a halt when his gaze fell on the southern mountain range. What is the world? The moment he was distracted, he was suddenly intercepted by a golden pillar of rising light. Suffering the sudden strike, they crashed into the city below. How was someone able to intercept his life-saving escape technique? His heart dropped when he saw the striking figure towering over him, clad in golden radiance. Hello there, he heart, when someone landed before him. Laika, the Amazon, had appeared. He swallowed hard. Her presence was completely different from the arena. So much that he doubted he had a chance, even if he went all out, but the even bigger problem was what he saw before being struck down. I surrender. Chapter 1147 Ascension and Fall. Yuma Ma stood in the center of an ice field. Spikes of frozen water, up to 30 stories high, surrounded the place where he fought the shield of the Pythian village. The twilight right after the sunset, when the first stars appeared and reflected in the ice, made it look almost ethereal. The barrier was sturdier than he expected, but it finally shattered. Seeing the carnage inside, doubts had started forming in his mind. It was true that the sect alliance wanted revenge, but maybe they had listened a little too closely, too greedily to the foreigners and their promises. Just what kind of trap had they been led into? No matter what, now he had to move to save the situation. He couldn't let the sacrifices be for naught. He would get rid of all obstacles and reassemble to alliance members before plundering the village and turning to Little Gamma. Determined to end everything, Yuma Ma stepped over the border where the barrier had been, but he halted. Cultivators always train their senses and spirit. Going through much meditation and many life or death situations gave them something akin to a sixth sense. It was a hunch that made him look to the far mountains. A hunch he had moments before the unnatural cry echoes across Little Gamma. This was not the roar of a beast, but the scream of the mountains. In the far distance, he saw the row of mountains surrounding Little Gamma. The peaks in the distance jolted and jumped up one by one, erupting in cascades of snow and the cries of boulders shattering and breaking apart. It was a sound that made even his 330-year-old heart shudder. The scene was almost reminiscent of a bow wave, like that of a big fish swimming close to the surface. Gritting his teeth, Yuma Ma tightened the grip on his weapon. Before his weary eyes, the mountains lifted their head. One of the smaller peaks between the foothills rose to the sky, atop a giant head. The sect master took a moment to recognize what he was witnessing. It was hard to make out in the early night, but the breaking mountains and splintering boulder rising to the sky took the distinctive shape of a snake. A giant serpent. A world serpent? A giant snake, a shocking thought came to his mind. Was this Python? The true Python? He cursed inwardly. Ding! You have witnessed the guardian deity, Python. Fear has entered your body. Your body temperature is falling. A foreign voice confirmed his worries in his head. As much as he mocked the worm he fought earlier for being called a guardian beast, he now cursed that this was just too much. This was on the level of a divine beast. Nobody told him about this. At this rate, he would have to risk his life to fight it. Looking at the hopeless battlefield behind him and the more than dangerous opponent before him, Yuma-ma made a decision. Moments before the barrier fell. Ding! Great achievement! Your creation Python has ascended to the status of a lower-ranking god. Level of existence +1. Your creation Python had become the guardian of Little Gamma. Plus 300% to all stats in the vicinity of Little Gamma. Your title, Divine Creator, has improved. Plus 20% to all stats of your autonomous creations. Plus 15% to all your attributes. Your title, Creator of Legends, has improved. Your creations have it slightly easier to raise their level of existence. Your title, Resurrection of Lore, has improved. The chance for your creation to gain power from the vestiges of the past increases even further. A big weight lifted from his heart when he heard the massive notification, while the other were discussing the overheating of the shield generators. He knew that Python sent a cheap clone to fight an immortal, but he didn't know why. Now, he felt like he understood. Python was at the cusp of ascension and needed time, but now she finally ascended to godhood. The serpent was the third creation of his that ascended to a legendary status and the first to become a god. The main objective of the Pythian Games was achieved before she had the chance for a showdown. He had a hard time believing how relieved he was that things had worked out. The blacksmith didn't mind the low-ranking prefix. With the 300% boost in the vicinity of Little Gamma, he doubted the sect master of the Silk River sect would stand a chance. What do you mean? How will it be okay? Jane's slightly upset voice came over the COMM link. Make sure to have the golem eyes observe you, Mama. Python is ready. The stadium had fallen silent. The chat had fallen silent. The world had fallen silent. The audience across the pathworks gaped in shock at the events currently unfolding on Earth. Legends and gods had revealed their existence in the relatively new world. Is that really Python? Some people asked. Fuck, that thing is the size of a mountain, others wondered about the incredulous size, which was hard for them to grasp. The shocked and unbelieving silence broke as waves of cheers filled the stadium and the chat was filled with emojis. The reappearance of Python meant they didn't have to die. Hey, isn't that guy running? What is Yuma-ma doing? Various voices commented on the scene shared on the big screen. At the sight of the giant snake, the immortal turned tail and charged into the city. The first thought was that he wanted to use the time until Python reached the Pythian village to kill as many enemies as he could. However, he simply passed by the fighter on the streets, not interfering with either side. Could it be, is he trying to flee? Some cultivators could be heard asking such questions, realizing that Yuma-ma was running straight in the direction of the massive barge he originally came on. Ha! Look at him running. Yuma-ma? More like Yo Mama. Look at him running to his mama, with his diaper full to the brim. The moment Big Mama appears, Yo Mama is running for his life. NGL, I also got the shits when the mountain suddenly moved. Chat was overflowing with cheers and jeering at Yuma-ma, who was sprinting across the Pythian village. The cultivator was moving at an incredible speed, so fast even the golem eyes couldn't keep up. Instead of an eye following him, the scene would always cut to the POV of golem eyes that were next to or along his path. At the same time, the massive snake was slowly emerging from the depths of the mountain range. In the dark, it looked like a huge shadow had risen, to swallow the stars in the sky, as Python threw her shadow on the Pythian village. If this went on, Yuma-ma would be able to get atop his ship and fly away. The people were dismayed. Partially, because the culprit of this mayhem was about to get away, but also because that meant they lost the chance to see a fight between legends. How often did one get such a chance? Legends were treated like secret weapons. Their deployment was top secret and their fights that would usually happen on war-torn border worlds seldom left witnesses. It was an incredible chance that was about to vanish. Seth was glad this was their reaction, although it seemed inappropriate for the level of danger everyone was in. Minasmar had successfully instilled confidence into the audience. They were confident in their safety measures, this was why they had the leeway to act relaxed. Though Seth's opinion slightly differed. He didn't want a fight between legends within the city. He still remembered the outcome of the fight between Alzalsa and a quasi-immortal from the voracious Cloud Continent. The mountain peaks surrounding Delta had become flying islands. Yuma-ma leaped in the air and landed on the deck of the big barge. Many of the disciples of the sect were currently in battle, so he stepped to the helm himself, to steer the vessel. Was he actually planning to leave the people of his sect behind? The sect leader of the Silk River sect quickly started his flagship and turned it around, aiming the dragon-faced bow south, the direction where they came from. Shocked, the audience and the Alliance members watched the barge shoot into the distance at top speed. Several beams from Epsilon's fleet hit it as it escaped, but couldn't penetrate the shield. The barge was flying so fast that it left golem eyes following it behind, forcing the editor to cut to other golem eyes across the city, to record it. When Yuma-Ma grossed the city borders, aiming for the southern mountains, everything seemed over. The audience already gave up their hope to see a legendary battle, when a giant thorn shot up from the ground. The spike of stone easily tore through the defensive formations of the ship and penetrated the bow all the way to the deck. The flying vessel wasn't just stopped in its tracks, but its own momentum ripped the giant mothership of the Sect Alliance apart. The Alliance was forced to witness their core piece turn into a cloud of exotic wood, golden embellishment, and smithereens. Moments after hitting the rock spire, something inside the ship exploded in a massive fireball, ripping apart the spire and what was left of the ship. Somewhere, somehow, a burning wheel was rolling out from the cloud of destruction just outside the city boundary. The message was clear: nobody was leaving today. Chapter 1148 Small Fist Pump. While everyone looked on in shock, still processing what just happened, Seth couldn't help a small fist pump when nobody was looking. Python not only epically stopped Yuma-Ma, but she also did so outside the city. Whether this was sensible consideration or coincidence, didn't matter. Despite seeming slow because of her size, Python was moving at an incredible speed. By the time Yuma-Ma's ship crossed the city boundaries, Python had also reached the edge of the Pythian village. She wasn't too far away when she cast the rock spire that brought the ship down. Dim lights of the city below illuminated her massive figure, towering over even the highest high-riser in the satellite settlement, as she closed in on the crash site. There were no signs of Yuma-Ma. Was he hiding? In the meantime, the cultivators that had held on all this time, even when they were surrounded and slowly whittled away, finally fell into a panic. Their own alliance leader, an immortal, didn't simply try to run away, but also completely abandoned them in the face of danger. The elders understood that choosing escape didn't mean that Yuma-Ma would definitely lose in a fight against the guardian beast. Evading an unprofitable fight was the intelligent thing to do, but completely abandoning them definitely meant the end of this alliance. It didn't take an elder to realize that they stood no chance when even the immortal decided to run. Flee, the various group leaders in the air screamed. Vermilion Autumn Sect to me. The barrier is gone. We have to leave. Grass Viper Temple, to me. Adorable Frog Lake, to me. This is a lost cause. We have to get out of here. Various sects tried to assemble what was left of their people while facing the continued attacks from Minasmar and its allies. Chaos ensued in the wake of Yuma-Ma's escape. Especially the Silk River sect was in dire straits, as their core vessel had just vanished in a cinematic explosion. Not just the flagship, their whole plan was suddenly coming down in flames. What would they do if they found out about the worst part? All of their failure and humiliation was broadcast live to a myriad of worlds. Their failure became legendary. I guess we won't get a chance to step in today, old friend, Xiongpeng mentioned to Master Mountain. The two allied cultivators stayed back, to only interfere if things were dire. You? What about us? Jess grumbled. The members that had gone on field trips across the pathworks to gain levels had all been on standby in the VIP lounge, forced to watch the others go out to fight. Monique sighed. You know why she spoke up, but Jess interrupted her. Yeah, same reason why his people weren't allowed to join, she said and pointed at Xiongpeng. The strategy was to only reveal as much power as was needed and as little as possible. This battle was the time for everyone else to gain some fame and levels. Although they all agreed on this strategy, they couldn't help but grumble. Who could blame them? They had to watch their friends go into battle and weren't allowed to help. On the other hand, they all understood Love's explanation. They couldn't always be there to help if something happened. On the contrary, if those who were strong always stepped forward to protect the others out of concern, then they didn't just protect them, but they took away their chance to grow. Of course, there was always danger involved, but this was still the closest to a controlled environment. It was better for everyone to fight here, where they could watch and intervene, than facing the regret when something unforeseen happened and they lost someone because they couldn't be there in time. The burning pile suddenly burst apart, spraying flaming debris and embers everywhere. The Alliance leader broke out from the remnants of his flagship. His robes were ripped and bloodied from the ship's explosion, giving him the aura of a warrior putting up a last stand, not a leader who tried to abandon his men. The orange glow of the spray of fire and cold moonlight from above illuminated the scene of the two very different opponents. "Fine then, beast. If you insist on this battle, I will fight you to the death," he cried out with fervor, as he rose to the skies. His eyes burned with wrath, facing the moving massif before him. He swung his frosty saber, gushing with growing icicles. "Glacial strike," he shouted the name of his technique, and a giant crescent of dark blue ice blocked out the moon and stars. The broadcast had to change to a wide-angle view to show the whole extent of the attack. The crescent of ice grew further as it flew, hitting the giant snake mountain in the neck. Like a glacier but with the speed of a bullet, the ice ground against the mountainous rock snake. Python was bathed in viscous floods of ice. But for a moment, she didn't move an inch. When the surge of ice passed, all it left was a shallow mark, ground in the shell of the guardian god. In the scene, showing the giant snake, facing the immortal, this attack seemed mighty but with little effect. However, the audience broke out in cries of astounding and panic, seeing the pictures of the attack's aftermath. Without the barrier, there was nothing protecting the Pythian village. Python suffered just a scratch, but the outskirts of the Pythian village were flooded by a tsunami of ice. Inns, restaurants, shops, and high-risers no matter what style were ripped away like models made of matchsticks. Even the sparse house trees placed in the Pythian village froze at the base and broke away. The one attack had completely devastated the southern edge of the city. Whatever was still on the streets in this place, was covered in tens of meters of ice. Only the barriers of temporary shelters set up by Minasmar in a hurry, barely held out against the peripheral damage of the attack, albeit flickering dangerously. This was the attack of a legend specialized in combat. Everyone who saw this scene, immediately understood why legends were only used with caution. It was also the first time for Seth to see this directly. It wasn't the extent of the damage that shocked him, but the ease with which it was brought. For Yumama, this seemed like an ordinary attack, as if he only got serious now and had held back in the fight with Python's stand-in. The giant snake head looked over the several square kilometers of the city that were drowned in heavy ice and snorted disapprovingly. "How dare you look away in our battle," the immortal shouted. He used a technique and appeared directly beside Python's head. Compared to the snake, the alliance leader was not even the size of an ant, but when he struck her with the saber she was thrown back, and half her head was covered in a clump of ice. However, "Let's change location," her voice echoed calmly through the whole city. It was spoken calmly but so loud, that even the immortal covered his ears. The voice of God was harsh to the ears of mortals. Adding the bonus because she was the guardian god of Little Gamma, it was even hard for the immortal to withstand. "As if I would follow the suggestion of," the alliance leader cried out, but he was interrupted. Python's head snapped back with speed unimaginable for her size, and he once again found himself in the maw of the giant snake. Fluidly, she followed the snap with a dive into the ground. The incredibly big snake dove into the ground, as if it was water, but without a single splash, and simply vanished together with her opponent. Seth was about to let out a sigh of relief, when the whole stadium shook. No, not just the stadium. The whole city shook as if it suffered an earthquake. What was going on? Chapter 1449 Foundation Shattering. Northwest of Python, a little earlier. The beast charging at her with shit propulsion, Porco Bella, a being close to becoming a legend with a level of at least 170 plus, was suddenly forced to throw himself to the side. Embarrassing and clumsy, the massive boar rolled on the ground to get away from the stream of fire that had suddenly aimed for its head. For the first time since he transcended mortality and worked towards becoming a demon lord, he felt a cold shiver run down his spine and fear grab his heart. For a moment he felt actually afraid of death. His mind instantly cooled down, although it was still a little hazy. This wasn't in the information they got. The cat girl wasn't supposed to be able to use such terrifying fire magic. She was a shadow assassin and a shadow mage, and it was mentioned that she might have a legendary item, but it should all align with darkness and shadows. His bowels churned and shit was running down his legs, but he pushed aside the shame he felt. He knew no magic for healing. A disease that could overcome his vitality. There was nothing he could do but to endure it. Pushing aside these thoughts, he focused on the situation at hand. Regaining focus just in time, Porco was able to slap away the fireball the size of his rotund belly. He acted on instinct, not fearing the magic, only to feel the searing pain cooking the palm of his hand after the fact. When his hand didn't heal instantly, he had a bad hunch concerning these flames, but he didn't have the time to think. Another flame pillar tried to drill through his body, attacking from the back. Once again, the massive pig was forced to roll through the field of debris, crushing several of the sacrificial offerings on his way. Rolling on the ground for the second time, he finally had the state of mind to gauge his situation. Looking at the cat girl, she was clearly frozen in fear and shock. Wasn't this her doing? Those feelings were not directed at him, but the man standing beside her. The armor couldn't hide its origins from Porcobello. There was tremendous demonic presence surrounding him, and the darkness of the visor shone with incredible malice. There was no mention of a demon of that caliber to have sided with Mina's march. It was the armored man that shot the fireball. The great demon knew because he observed him throw it the moment he saw him. He didn't repeat the same mistake and evaded the attack this time. Slowly, his rusty battle senses reawakened. He had been fighting weaklings for too long, leading to this embarrassing situation. Porco dodged the next flame pillar, too. The attack was lethal but predictable. How long had it been since he was forced to fight seriously? He had almost forgotten how to fight a dangerous opponent. Now, that his mind changed gears, he had no problem dealing with such attacks. The next fireball was leisurely slapped away. This time he protected his palm with his demonic power, not suffering any injury at all. I am the Demon Baron, Porcobello. Who are you? The demon, vigilant of the second attacker who cast the flame pillar, called out. Although he couldn't know all the names of powerful demons, because they were a fragmented group of people, there was still a chance. If he knew his identity, he would have a better way to estimate his strength and powers. The other made a sound for the first time. He laughed. I know what you are thinking. My name won't be of help to you, even if you know it. I'm Basilith, guard of the harem, he announced loud and proud, slamming his fist against his chest. The face of the cat girl beside him turned a bright red. The harem guard was right, the name didn't ring any bells for Porcobello, but his heart dropped when he noticed something else. When the armored demon slammed his hand against his chest, Porco recognized the crest emblazoned on the cuirass. With a racing heart, he dodged another stream of fire aiming for his life. He finally realized why he had a bad hunch about these flames. In the corner of his eyes, he also noticed who cast the streams of fire. It was a lone blade, flying in the air. But this wasn't important. He didn't know who Basilith was, but this was the crest of Zaphon, demon god of the burning skies. Together with the hunch he had earlier, this left only one conclusion: Basilith had the blessing of Zaphon. Rousing his powers, Porcobello ignored the floating blade and charged at the Basilith. He had to take him out as quickly as possible. He couldn't risk fighting the flame of burning skies for too long. Even if he could balk it, it was a flame that could permanently burn holy and demonic powers. Someone of his level would never recover what was lost this way. He had to crush this harem guard as quickly as possible. His senses tingled and he made a somersault. A blade covered in flames passed where his neck had just been. The unfinished sword kept attacking him as if swung by a master swordsman. The attacks of the blade had suddenly become incredibly sharp, totally different from the earlier, predictable magic attacks. Basilith also charged forward. Covered in flames, his armor began glowing in a bright orange. As if they realized what he was trying to do and decided to work together, the blade and the demon attacked Porcobello with synchronized attacks. The knowledge about the flame severely hindered the great demon from unleashing his full power. Compared to his usual style of reckless, overpowering strength, he was forced to be incredibly careful, trying not to receive any attacks from the flame, at all. As long as he bought enough time for the ritual to finish, he could leave this troublesome matter to the avatar of Gatries and capture the cat girl. Time stretched as he concentrated on evading with his large body, minimizing the times he counterattacked. Porco clicked his tongue. What was the stupid priestess doing? With a sidestep, he turned into smoke once again, so get out of their combined attacks and throw a glance at the effigy of Gatries where the priestess of Gatries was lying dead on the floor, a dagger sticking out from the back of her head. The cat girl stood close by, watching his fight with Basilith. He blanked for a moment. He had not paid any attention to her after Basilith appeared. In that time, that wench went ahead and killed the Saintess. It was just a moment where he stopped, distracted by the sudden change in situation, but it came at a steep price. It was too late to evade the blade suddenly slashing down at him. His arms rose to the sky, instinctively blocking the attack. The sharp metal sliced his thick hide, cutting deep into his flesh, all the way to the bone. The force was so great he sank and foot deep into the pavement, but it was unable to sever his limb. Pain filled his mind. It was like liquid fire was flooding his forearms. The next moment a terrifying impact hit his already sorry stomach. While the sword forced him to block, Basilith had hit him right in the belly, causing another fountain of shit and blood to stain his legs. This was it. He had enough. The ritual was ruined. There was no other way left than to deal with these maggots seriously. Tremendous power roused from the depths of his soul as he lifted his hands above his head and slammed them on the ground. Demonic energy flooded the ground and traveled deeper and deeper. Past the pavement, past the roots, shattering the very foundation of the city, the mountain bedrock. Chapter 1150 Amazon Delivery. Just a moment ago he was glad that Python had taken her fight elsewhere, and now the whole city suddenly rocked like there was an earthquake. The arena just shook a little, but the scenes of the city were different, where some buildings hit by the shock wave simply crumbled away. Guys, what is going on there? Seth asked through the COMM link, forcing his voice to stay calm. The blacksmith was still in public, standing with Daolun in the arena. He couldn't show that there was anything to be worried about. The epicenter is in the northwest of the city. We lost contact with the golem eyes in the area some time ago. Judging from the damage across the whole region, it seems that an unexpectedly strong enemy appeared there. Love calmly summarized that their plan had gone a little awry. Seth burrowed his brows. He had a bad hunch when he asked the next question. Who is fighting in the northwest? With this kind of damage, they had to be close to being a legend and or have several legendary items. Mina went there, Love finally answered. The blacksmith's frown deepened. He saw it coming, but he still hoped he was wrong. Among the members that didn't leave Earth, only Mina had Basilith. The golem was one with the greatest potential among his more recent creations and probably the strongest in Little Gamma, apart from Python. Seth also knew that Mina was more than strong enough to at least flee from a very strong enemy. Still, his fist clenched in worry. Do we have anyone in the area that could help quickly? Seth whispered. Around this time, he regretted not bringing Tatzel and Puffles. The two were not interested in the tournament and stayed in Delta, otherwise, Seth would have thrown the nightmare centipede at the problem. Well, there is someone, yes. Fuck, Mina pressed out. She could only run for now, as fast as she could. The whole land was cracked and shifting. Porcobello stood in the center of a crater, a web of cracks surrounding him, as the broken floor rose like a cliff, or sank to unknown depths. The loss of the Saintess seemingly came with the loss of its mind. He had just devastated the whole northwest of the city. A quick glance around told her that the primary destruction had hit none of the civilians floating around. She breathed a sigh for a moment, then Mina saw. In the distance, Porco had lifted his hands again for another strike. She gulped hard. A single strike had broken the very mountain below their feet. What happened the second time? The rampage of someone close to the legendary status was frightening. Basilith was a streak of flaming metal as he charged at the demon to end his rampage, but before he could stop the pig, the fist struck the ground again. Pillars of land rose to the skies, blocking the golem's path. Using the instinct of the blaze cat, Basilith barely managed to maneuver between the rising cliffs and close in on his target. When a wall rose right in front of him, he slashed it, proving the power of a creation built with legendary materials. The flaming blade in his hand easily cut the bedrock, leaving surfaces of bubbling molten rock. The two clashed again. Even with this display of strength, Mina didn't think that Porco was much superior to the golem given to her by Seth. In her opinion, the difference was that one side tried to preserve the surroundings, while the other had let go of any reason. However, she didn't have the time to idly watch the battle anymore. Basilith didn't have the time to care, and the great demon had no intention to begin with, to be careful of the floating people in the air. The hundreds of people, cultivators and players that didn't use home call in time and were assembled to be sacrificed here were still filling the air above them. Although she wanted to join the battle, she couldn't ignore the people who would lose their lives in the throes of battle. As the only one able to, she decided that disaster management was the best she was able to do in this situation. Jumping in the air, using air step and feather fall, Mina rose into the sky, catching the unconscious people with her magic. Shadow tendrils grew from the darkness and slithered through the night, collecting the levitating bodies. Using her shadow magic and her ring's telekinesis, Mina did her best to get the captives away from the center of the battle. Luckily, the people were not pinned in place. She was able to move them with a moderately strong nudge. As speed was of the essence, there may have been some more forceful nudges here and there, but a few bruised and broken ribs were better than death, right? The battle below was raging on. Mina was forced to revise her earlier opinion, as the battle went on. Ever since Porco released his power and shattered the ground, he clearly had the upper hand. Using overwhelming strength and speed in addition to tactics incorporating the terrains, he was able to pressure Basilith. Had Porco been holding back before? For what reason? No matter what the reason was, he stopped holding back and things weren't going well for the golem. Despite being able to harm the demon in some moments, using unexpected moves, Basilith being broken and squashed by the pig's fist happened a lot more often. Looking down, Mina worried. The radius of destruction kept growing as more buildings crumbled and were swallowed by the rifts in the ground. If things kept going like this, she would have to move the floaters even further away. For now, she placed them close to the western edge, where the noise of battle quietened. Here, they floated like a group of misshapen jellyfish in the night sky of the empty city. There were probably several thousand at this point. Mina sighed. She was fatigued, but at least she was almost done. She turned around to go get the rest when a golden meteor crashed into the city not far away from her. The shadow mage melded into the darkness, preparing for a potential enemy, however. Hey, Mina! Are you here? I saw you just a moment ago. Love sent me to help. Laika announced her presence with a bright smile. Laika, she recognized the Amazon in her golden battle gear. However, in the first moment, she doubted she would be of much help. Although Seth and the others insisted that she was extremely powerful, Mina had only seen her performance during the tournament. Could she have beaten the Amazon at Level 100 without any legendary equipment? Maybe not, but unless the unsealed power was tremendous, she would be as much help in the fight against Porcobello as her so far. The radiating woman's smile grew wider as if reading her thoughts and being amused by it. Don't worry, I released the seal on my way here. I will definitely be able to help, she guaranteed. It was weird. At first, Mina had her doubts, but when she looked at the Amazon's handsome smile, she slowly lost her worries. Maybe she should have some more confidence in Seth and the others, guaranteeing her strength. Well, fine then. Let's get going. I still have a bunch of people hanging around, waiting for me. The cat girl shrugged and signaled the Amazon to follow her, as she vanished into the night, in the direction of battle.